Okay, so I'm over here mixing away and I realized I'm going to whip this camera on and show you another sequence here, because I realized maybe more is better than less. It can't hurt, essentially. Okay, let's gonna move stuff around here. Basically what happened is I got out shooting. I was doing some heavy documentation of the Thing project, and hey, check that out in the background. Brownells finally came through with some acro glass. I have been waiting and waiting. I was down to my last weeny little bit of catalyst. I called it release agent in one of the other videos, but anyway, no, it was just the catalyst. And I was getting really, really low. So what I'm going to do here, I just figured, again, some of you are going to find this boring. If you don't want to see some more glass bedding, then by all means, go watch something else. There's plenty of viral videos over on 9gag where you can watch cats falling off of stuff and people doing other things. So, I mentioned before how I do this in multiple colors. In the videos that I just released, we were out shooting this thing in its first iteration. The Thing in this stock bedded with one screw. And what I've done now, I just had this thing in the barrel vise. I am going to the next phase, which is a pull down screw and also a screw down recoil lug. I did something weird on this recoil lug. I don't normally do this. I actually put relief on the bottom of it. You'll notice the tape. This one, after it's bedded, I'm going to pick it out of there, clear up that tape. I'm leaving a little relief so that I can actually adjust this screw for effect. Just stuff I'm going through, just ideas. Good, bad, or indifferent, it's what I'm doing this go around. So, just to reiterate some of the things about bedding, I use Kiwi neutral shoe polish. I need to get some more because this has done 1,000 guns and it's starting to break up and whatever. But this is Kiwi brand, neutral color. And after I'm done, make sure this focus is good so that you can see clearly what I'm doing here. Yeah, I think it is. I don't know. I Kiwi this whole thing and then I polish it. All of the surfaces that are going to be taking bedding, I assiduously polish right back to a shine. I take everything off as much as I can. Now, another thing that's important, and something I may not have covered in other bedding videos. Okay, while I've got this open, you can see some of the colors, and this is why it's cool. You can see some of my support structures here. You can see how I've gone in, because remember, my contention is that these things lift up out of the stock. They pull. This is all about taking care of that rotating, pulling, lifting moment. So I've got, in this area, I've actually undermined up under this top ridge of the stock so that as it tries to lift, it's hooked, it's contained. So I've got various, and I just milled this back out, got a bunch of clearance in the barrel channel. Now I'm ready to bed this one conventionally. Another thing that I haven't really touched on much, I don't think in other videos, that is important to this. I noticed that one of the videos I put out recently, I talk again about how much I pre-bed. Pre-bedding is doing bedding in many different stages, using the bedding as a tool, using a bedding to set angles, using the bedding to get the trigger guard locked in, or a chassis system locked in, or because I mix this stuff quickly and in quantity. Oh, and by the way, I realized something else about this epoxy. I've been mixing it at 0.263 ratio, which is just hotter than 4:1. And I had done some testing and I found that the catalyst was, the weights were a tiny bit different, but I found out one of the big drivers I had was that this room has been at about 60 degrees. I bumped it up to 70 because it's winter and I don't like it. And I realized that in the summer I've been keeping it cooler and into the fall. So that 263 works, but right now I'm going by weight with Brownell's epoxy, which is their, you don't normally see it like this. You're normally going to see it in a little thing like this, epoxy resin, and I've been using 0.263 as my multiplier. I've recently changed that to 4:1 by weight, 1:4 by weight. So I'm just using 0.25, and it's fun because I can go up there, throw this thing on the scale, brrr, hit about, in this case I hit 200 grains. And once I had hit 200 grains, I just could do the math in my head without the 263 multiplier. I could do 263 and get it close anyway, but I used 250, and so I just went to 200, boop, stopped, put that can aside, took the Resin Hardener, which is this stuff. I did call it release agent earlier because I get fixated on release agent, but anyway, I took the resin, or the hardener for the resin. So I had 200 grains. All I had to do was add 50. I can do that math in my head. So I grabbed the hardener, ran it up to 250. Boom, it's warmer today. And so now when I'm doing this pre-bedding, you have to understand one of the hardest things to get is good permeation, not good permeation, but good cover. Try not get scabbiness in here. So I'm going to go over some of the things that I do. I actually pre-coat everything, almost paint everything. In fact, I have acid brushes, and sometimes I do paint all the surfaces. In this case, I'm not going to because it's not very much, and I don't feel like going to get the acid brushes. Now, here's another thing I want to go over with some of you people that maybe haven't done this much. You'll notice a few things. You'll notice that I'm not masking anything. I'm just going to let it puke out all over this stock. Because then I turn around and because I'm using so little and it's going to puke so little, and I'm using a black, this time I mixed it very dark black. This is probably going to be, well, it's never going to be a final coat, because one of the things that some of you more astute people have figured out by now is that every time I change and try another method here, I've got to tear out, mill out, and rebed this thing for each different iteration. So this is going to have tear out, redo, tear out, redo, tear out, redo so many times. I'm going to do something weird here. Just in the interest of maybe saving a little bit of cleanup later. I decided at the last minute, this by the way is unwise when you're epoxying. Don't follow my lead. Don't think of this stuff after the fact. Putting a little surround like I said, might make the cleanup just a wee bit tidier on this, and again, might not make much difference at all. But I wanted to go over some stuff because this epoxying, I say every now and again, oh, don't fear the epoxy. Well, that's true, because when you get in trouble with epoxy, it's always fixable. Heat always destroys an epoxy bond. A hot hair dryer will destroy an epoxy bond. The epoxy bonds, this kind of stuff, disintegrate at somewhere around 250 degrees. So no, you don't have to fear the epoxy, but especially when you're doing this fill back in stuff, but at any time in this process, you still have to think ahead. You still have to be smarter than the epoxy matrix. And that's harder than it might seem because things occur, things happen that you don't think about. One of the things that you have to be careful to do, especially when you're skimming this, is take, after you've skimmed everything, I've now got, this is really, I'm close to all that I need in here. I mixed up way too much epoxy. But you can take this, I've done this just to make sure that I don't have any bubbles, and I've put it onto the substrate. This is still the only section that we're bedding here. I'm letting the barrel free float. And dropping this thing in. Now, where I'm going with this is after you've wiped everything down, make sure that you're paying attention and bring everything kind of to the middle. Leave the center high. Picture the fact that you're trying to drop a round object down into this hole, and as it displaces the epoxy, you want it to touch the center first and push out air bubbles. I'm getting way too much here because I'm trying to illustrate, and I'm realizing this does not pick up on camera, so there's really no reason to. But trust me, now I can take a bunch of this off on the outer edges. Doesn't even have to be here. It's going to come back. And we're going to go down, we're going to squish this stuff out until it's gone. There shouldn't really be much of anything left on those outer edges. But it's high in the middle, so that when I roll this thing down in, it touches in the middle first and displaces out and pushes the air bubbles and everything out and bubbles it out onto the stock. Another thing you want to do is when you take these assemblies, make sure you check it first. I didn't know if I'd have enough time on the video to go through this, so I didn't show you the checking process. But trust me, I already know that this is going to go in here. It's already been in here. I've already done this. There's no news. There's no... Now, because this is so tight, we're going to be squeezing and cleaning for a while, and we're going to be doing it slowly because I put quite a bit of epoxy mud in there, and there really was no room. There really wasn't much to do. So this is a case where I've got the end of the barrel supported. I checked this with a caliper. I set it into the pre-bed, tightened the screws, checked this with the caliper, maintaining my alignment completely. The first time I bedded this in, it was 100% neutral. It settled in just like this under its own weight. Now I'm in a slightly different position. As I squeeze this, more stuff comes out. That's a good thing and that's a bad thing. I don't mind if this bedding picks up a thousandth or two in its rebedding, which is what I'm doing. I'm actually rebedding. And notice that this cleanup now, because I've got such small voids, I'm wiping it down. I can now take a rag and wipe it again. I can really disappear all this, and then the next trick, which I don't think I'm going to show you, but when this is all cleaned up, as best I can do with just a rag, there's still a skinny little residue left on there. White vinegar. Just remember, white vinegar. This is something new now that I'm trying, and I'm going to try it here. I never pressure these up, but in this case I have a perfect bedding substrate down there. The only place I'm bedding is right here. I believe I can wrap this right now with rubber tubing and suck it down so that it continues to squeeze out material. We'll just see if I can get anything to squeeze out here. Well, man, it seems to be bottomed right out. So, I think I'm going to go ahead and do a vinegar cleanup. Just because I don't think, I've got a little bit of time left on the video. And as I said, people, you don't want to watch this, go away. Flick it off. I'm not saying it's going to get any more exciting. But this is the vinegar cleanup, and this stuff, vinegar actually neutralizes. They say the solvent at epoxy websites, at Henkel, at And even the stuff that Brownell sells, they use acetone, and acetone is fine, but acetone tends to melt the occasional thing here and there. White vinegar doesn't. And white vinegar is something that I learned years ago in gunsmithing school. I want to make it clear that even though I got kicked out of gunsmithing school, that doesn't mean I didn't learn a lot there. School is about having access to the information and then what you do with it. It's not necessarily about the environment of the teachers. Anyway, that's meaningless. Now this is cleaned up to where, because I'm going to be rebedding and rebedding and rebedding, there are many across, but realistically I've got a shiny top surface on there. I've got this cleaned up to the point that unless a bunch oozes out when I pressure it, which shouldn't happen. Now understand, I'm not advocating that you wrap, and I'm trying a new wrap here. I normally use surgical tubing. I got this stuff for another reason, and I just have a bunch of pieces cut. Some of my surgical tubing has been used and reused so many dozens of times that it's actually getting gluey residue and sticky and stuff on it. This stuff will work just fine too. Now I've got a pressure on here, probably 100 pounds. Forget I said that. I just put, 10, 20, 30, it might have 40 or 50 pounds of squeeze on it. It's amazing how much this can do. Try wrapping a rubber band around your finger one time to find out that you'll blow the end of your finger off before too long. So this is we're moving into the next phase. Now we're doing the thing in this stock. So far, we shot the other day. We've documented it. You've watched that video if you're following this. This assembly with a different barrel. I just viced this barrel on. This is a barrel with a .300 PTG recoil lug that is glued to this shank. It is being used to bridge the gap from this little inch 2 barrel up to the inch 350. This actually looks like an inch 250 barrel. But the point is, I want to put my 150 foot-pounds on this. Alright? So, I timed this, and I had to go a little hard, 156 foot-pounds roughly, to time this and bring it around to where these hanging down screws, which you're seeing down here, work. So, it's a little tricky. I wouldn't recommend you do this at home, people. This is kind of trying to get a recoil lug glued to the barrel to come around in time to pull down. I'm only documenting what I'm doing. This is not yeah, I do sometimes say, hey guys, try this stuff. Doesn't mean that everything is super easy to accomplish and to try. So this is one that I'm not recommending, but I'm testing it for you. I'm going to find out, can we get this bench rest stock to hold tight and to harmonize? These are good components. There's nothing here that won't shoot, but I've dramatically weakened the action by hogging the side out. It's now very floppy. And so now we're taking this whole recoil tuning fork impulse that I keep talking about, we're picking it up right here. We've moved to phase 2 of this portion of the thing. We got a pull down screw, which is the factory one, and we've got a pull down screw tapped into the bottom of this recoil lug. And when all is said and done, this will now be holding by 2 screws, and there's an aluminum block in here that's spreading the force. Hopefully 2 hold down screws, 1/4-28 torque to whatever. I don't get into this whole. If you gotta, basically if your gun shoots different depending on how you've torqued the screws, and it's bedded conventionally, all that's telling you is that the bedding is screwed up. So, in this case, I'm going to torque them tight, boom, boom. We're going to take it out and shoot it. And whether I document the shooting or whether I just slip it in with a bunch, I might go through phase so that I don't have to bore you with every phase of this testing. In the end, I have a hunch we're going to end up bedding this, because right now the tang is floating. In the end, I have a hunch we're going to be tie down screws up here and a tie down screw back here, and we're going to do our best to rigidify this, and then we will have hopefully accomplished. I'd like to accomplish it earlier in my process, like I'd like this to shoot, but if we can't, I can go one more spread. I've got another set of pull down screws. I'm going to go out to where I can put a pull down screw a little further away, but still, we're doing the whole hold down action in this little 2 to 2.5 inch section. If we can't get that to work, we're going to have to go back. I'll tear this old homemade trigger guard off of here. We'll glue in a conventional recoil lug and put in a pillar, and now we'll start to transfer from here to here. Now those of you who are actually thinking about what I'm doing here are going to realize that because I have a hold down screw right here in this recoil lug, that changes the way this barrel can vibrate when it's trying to break that joint. Not vibrate, but the action on this joint. Now when this barrel comes up, it's held right here. There's a pivot point right here. Prior, the pivot point was the threads themselves, wherever this tightened up. We had a screw here and it was flexing the end of the action. Picture this with me. Now we've moved another screw up here, so it does more than just increase the holding surface. It also gives us a pivot point out here, which means when this tries to pivot on this surface, that's held down by a screw that I can adjust for tension. And that transfers my disrupting forces back into the threads. That's poorly explained, but think about that with me. As I move these hold down points, it does change the dynamic.